Journey Writers has typically identified individuals for our Queer Black History program from the United States and from the last century. This time, we're inviting you to go a different direction with us. In this program, we want to be more expansive, both in time and in geography, and take a look at historical figures who may have not even thought about the LGBTQ+ experience. It was just their way of life. It's a reminder that LGBTQ+ was not born in the 70s or in the 60s or at the end of slavery or during the Harlem Renaissance. It existed well before that. Today, we are sharing with you the stories of some incredible individuals from the past. And, by the way, LGBTQ+ was a part of who they were.
This is good. This is good. This is good. I am Oshun, called to form, to bring life to this plane they call Africa. There was nothing before me. You're welcome. You needed to know something. Since the beginning of days, mythology, theology, and faith was woven into the fibers of this land. It traveled with people, a tangible force, and twisted and turned with them through time. The beliefs of the people are a living thing that celebrate every aspect of essence. It is what makes me a goddess, a god, and a human. The original man carries belief in the other, in a pantheon of strong belief and guides, gods, and practices that stayed entrenched culturally no matter where or what circumstances they lived under. We've never been just one thing and worshipped in many ways. Some have called out to me in voodoo, Santeria, Candomblé, and Vodun, even mixed my essence into the African Catholic beliefs that came into being as a result of slavery. For people of color, it has never been unusual for spiritual belief to overshadow the physical reality of life. And finding a patroness and higher power that protects your life force has always been done. Spiritual belief traveled just as freely as oral history. This is a tale of how I came to be here, before people were formed long ago. Tales date back as far as 13,000 BC. In all the traditions around me, I protect the poor. I protect the motherless children and heal ailments of the worthy. I am the joy bringer, the bestower of song, music, dance, fertility, prosperity, and the bringer of mysticism. They call me the mother of sweet things. And yes, I share pieces of myself with humans. So I will not apologize for my perceived vanity, jealousy, and spite. I have been chosen, goddess of many places in society where there exists a third gender. These include the Bakla, Shibados from Angola, the Ortero from Sudan, and Hiras. And in places where not necessarily a third gender, but believe in gender and sexual fluidity, including enslaved people's private rituals, voodoo society, and modern ancestor worship, forced hiding and subsequent mingling with colonizer society. In places like Mardi Gras, in Carnival. You can be man, woman, living as whomever comfortable in your truth, conflicted and in secret, or hetero. Oshun belief is there. I have been seen everywhere, encouraging and supporting difference as a thing to celebrate and offering comfort to the oppressed. Oshun, this color is mine. On the first day, I arrived as a sole female with my 16 brothers and brought with me the elements of divine love. I was sent here as the youngest, prettiest, to bring forth creation. My brothers laughed and thought of me as just a frivolous trifle, a simple goddess of water. Is not man made mostly of water? Swallowing their pride was something my brothers were unable to do. My power did it for them. My sweet water gave life and brought forth creation of love spread across the land, aided by my divine protection. The gods Olodumare and Obatala were pleased, and I ascended and elevated. The other gods were forced to agree. The people would learn too. Just as I am the bringer and bearer of love, so too am I the harbinger of wrath when angered. My sweet water can boil like the sweetest molasses and flood and choke the throat of the land until I am appeased. Sweetness and beauty of life can also be the sweetness and beauty of death. Do not tempt my anger. For just as I created you all to come together in beauty and love wherever it finds you, I can take it away from you wherever it finds you. I just want to be loved the way I want to be loved. Look, do you see my city? I let them build it and agreed to provide and protect and have it raised as a dwelling of love. And in return, well, I ask nothing, save constant praise and adoration. Even today, the people of Yoruba, people of Ashogbo, celebrate me in festival with song and dance. I am favored on voodoo altars and voodoo prayer circles, on altars in drag houses, and even in the city botanicas where there are items of worship for me. Even on the Isle of Lesbos, the poet Sappho sang my praises. Women seek boons for fertility, and many seek blessings for wealth, health for their children, and a love free from harm. Is it any wonder why Supreme God Olodumare favors me above all others? How could he hope to comprehend true beauty unless you have that thing truly? It is a blessing I share my love that way, isn't it? Who else did you think the altars of yellow flowers were for in many of the old-time drag houses? Me. I am praised there. I'm the Orisha of love, encapsulating the femininity identity in all its forms. Just so many forms of divine feminine energy, from coquette to fierce warrior mother to red-eyed lover. A young child of mine, Audre Lorde, praised me with the winds of Orisha. She wrote the lines. The beautiful Oshun and I lie down together. In the heat of her body truth, my voice becomes stronger. Do you see? When you are a people steeped deep in mystery and belief, steeped deep in the belief that love is love and it cannot be stopped. Come, children of my water, look deeply in my mirror. And I will show you more of my children and speak of the rich lives they led from land to land. Oh, look, here comes one now. Hatshepsut, Hatshepsut.
Many things about this life are amusing. Time is amusing, but timing even more so. The desperation of the sun to bake the land while a cool 90-degree breeze drifts over 105-degree land is amusing. Children playing naked, brown faces bare, safe, fresh claw-lined eyes, and hairless with jewelry gleaming in the blazing sun are amusing. A snake coiled on a rock watching you watch him is amusing. The pyramids, those tales alone are amusing. The time it took for supposed intellectuals to realize that enslaved people did not build them, but instead paid laborers. Who would be so foolish as to set the task for the eternal rest of a living God to one forced to create it? Forget about the others for a moment. That Cleopatra woman, forget Cleopatra. King Tut, Hatshepsut was quite possibly the greatest pharaoh in history. She didn't come to power through assassinations or war, nor did she even engage in violence. Pharaoh Hatshepsut got here by accepting all the parts of her and making them work together. I am called a woman child, married and on this throne before I was 12. One never knows when one is becoming the standard of future things. Had I known, I defined black girl magic, I dress better. In my days, you were a child, and then you were not. It was less about your age and more about circumstance. There was no mid-space. I tell you, that is amusing as sleeping on a stone pillow. I've been called the woman who would be king, foolish and very short-sighted. Why would I need to be king? I was already royalty, a princess, and then queen. I was born a kingmaker. That is something a king cannot ever be. Why? Why aim lower? I am the woman who would be Pharaoh or Ma'akare, the spirit of harmony and truth. And in taking the title of Pharaoh, what is most amusing is people ignorant of my cunning duality. I did much way paving for others. My cunning and bravery gave me the strength to create and stand my truth. Not at all uncommon for uncommon women do uncommon things and mistake them for common. Was I a man or a woman? Hatshepsut or Marakare, both and neither. My entire being was a complete example of my complexity of my home, like Miser, Kemet, and Egypt, as you may call it, as many names, including the upper and lower black land. I, Hatshepsut, was a multiple of things, a plethora of titles, bigger than the 3 Egyptian sexes, male, female, and eunuch. I was Pharaoh, and Pharaoh means the son of the sun. whichever variant the ruler took. Amun, Aten, or Re, was the absolute center of life in Egypt. By this caveat, the son of the sun had unquestionable divine right. Divinity gave me agency. I wanted it, so I took it. Quite literally. A star was born. Initially, I was content enough with calling myself Lady of the Two Lands, a regent, watching while my man-child husband grew. He was even younger than I. I was about 12 and married to a man, not a boy, not a child, not a baby who was 2 years old. He was the man in charge of Egypt, but I believe Egypt needed more. I believe Osiris intended for me to grasp the crook and flail. The shepherd's crook stood for kingship, and the flail for the fertility of land. So I took the throne and got a new attitude. Let that queen business fall by the wayside, like crocodile dung dropped on the shore of the Nile. And just like crocodile dung was packed into the bodies of Egyptian women to stop reproduction, I too gave up the guise of womanhood and picked up the crook and flail in all areas except my art. I pronounce myself to the world as a man.
Once upon a time, there was a weak king who disregarded and disrespected his sister. One memorable day, however, the sister forced everyone to look deeper at the whole picture. King Mbundu was a spineless fish. He thought to send his harmless sister to beg for a peace treaty with the Portuguese, who wanted more of the people, the dark demons, enslaved. So, in 1619, a 22-year-old Nzinga had been ordered by her delusional brother and sanctioned by the Portuguese, thinking her an easy pawn, to present herself into the clearing where the governor of Luanda sat in a chair. On the ground at his feet was a mat. The governor looked at Nzinga and inclined his head at the mat. Nzinga stared back at him. And in that moment, time stood still, and then history unfolded in ways the men could not have imagined. Let me explain something to you. This land will rain colonizer blood before I ever give you one of my people. There will be so few of you, the entire population of Portugal will die out. The entrails of your children will fertilize the ground and feed the worms, and maggots will live in the bodies of their mothers and their mothers' mothers. And I will wear your skin on my feet as I walk over them. Is there something else you wish to discuss, Governor? Oh, and Governor, now that you've seen I have sacrificed one for the good of gaining your understanding of my might and intent through any means aggressive, as any other male ruler around now. I'm not here to be seen as a hero, just the warrior king. So return my weak brother when you release my people. I've written you a note in Portuguese, so you won't have the language difficulty I've heard your people suffer from. I easily learned yours instead. That was an interesting day. And in 1636, after I'd spent years suffering like a forced eunuch under my weak brother, a hobbled kitten, when I am a lion, my brother the king died. Suicide, I'm told. Tragic, really. Sadly, his son died too. Amusing in that it was the exact same thing that happened to my family, and yet no compensation for the total magnitude of horrors he committed to me and his family. And although Angola is a matrilineal society, I was royalty by my father, the previous king, and thus automatically deemed lesser. On top of murder, he abducted and forcibly sterilized my two sisters and I. So you can ask me, was I responsible? That's such a difficult word. Some would call it revenge, vengeance, or simply fair. He killed my son, shortened my family line. We are from a warrior tribe. I am a warrior, and thusly followed warrior ways. It was a justifiably expected action of the times. His narcissism did not allow him to conceive it. It was ignorance based on preconceived notions of what a woman would or would not do. I simply submitted cunningly for a time, then acted. There was going to be no more bending of my beliefs, and very little explanations about them. I heard there was a man in the hereafter with me who once said something like, "By any means necessary." Sounds like my kind of warrior. Anyway, I waited until the time was right, and gone was his family. And I became queen. It was inevitable we would go to war. I stepped in before my useless criminal brother died because the Mbangala were more than he could handle. Very true, having had aligned myself with them briefly. But strangely, backdoor human trading for his own self-preservation wasn't. A tsetse fly had more might and much more honor. I lived such a full life, full of passion and violence, and treating politics like a chess game. I lost and retook my throne several times. In fact, by 1641, I entered the earliest African-European alliance against another European nation by lining up with the Dutch. Many people died, both by my hand or by raising it against me. For 37 years, I fought. And to this day, Portugal has never had an opponent the likes of me. I even changed my name as a political move and became Christian. I was like a strategic genius, playing on their egos that believed themselves superior, boldly taking the name of the governor, Nzinga Ana de Sousa Mbande. The men in power foolishly underestimated me again because of blind acceptance of constricting European gender roles, not once considering I was complex enough for thoughtful subterfuge, only for emotional misbehavior that made them comfortable and thinking me an infant as a way to explain my actions. Fools. They gave me an excuse for my actions. I slapped their faces and made them like it. Living my life, I was a person of big appetites and big ego. I kept a large harem of men dressed as women. I understand some might consider my appetite slightly distasteful, but judge me by the culture of my times. I think today's doctors might call it latent daddy issues. Is not a king considered one's father? I used to have the harem men fight to the death for just one night with me. And in the morning, I'd kill the winner too. The queen of Nzinga does not use the same chair twice, or the same man, was the story they told. And really, I just preferred women warriors anyway. I was just picking who I wanted. Only a fool would kill for no benefit. Over the years, my actions became bolder and even more calculated. The wars were violent, brutal, but I kept at it and built up my army with people who escaped enslavement. And slaves, and yes, we did have our own form of enslavement among tribes. But it was more normal than not for this person to be incorporated into the village as a member through deed, service, or marriage. Not through dehumanization. Not simply evil flesh peddlers. I've yet to meet a ruler with no defeats, but it didn't stop me from warring with the Portuguese. They wanted all of Africa. The Portuguese really, really loved slavery, and I really, really hated them. And I really, really loved being king. Queen Nzinga didn't quite have the same level of aggression I lived for. So I became King Nzinga and lived equally as a man and a woman. As long as you didn't spend the night with me as a man, you'd probably live. Listen to me. Calling something history doesn't mean a retelling of a person being a hero. It means retelling accurately. And at the end, I thought about my life. I came into the world with my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. Oppressed before I could even take my first breath in this world. It was said babies born like those had special powers and would go on to do great things. An umbilical cord couldn't stop me, and neither could any form of oppression.
She was my godmother. She gave me my first pet, a German shepherd named Nero, and he got too big for me to keep in the apartment where I lived. So she said, "I'll keep him here for you, baby." We spent time watching TV, and she would fall asleep and wake up to say, "Dessa tired, baby. Are you hungry?" I loved her so much.
My God baby said that when asked, "How will you remember Odessa?" She was so sweet, and I showed all my sweetness to her and a very few others. Most who knew me remember me as a criminal, a mob boss, as Lady Al Capone, of Washington, D.C. In my mind, so many things are just subject to interpretation. You see, the people in charge define what's criminal and what's legal. It used to be a crime to sell and drink liquor, and then it wasn't. And all on the whims of white men. Hell, for most of my life, it was a crime for a man to love a man and a woman to love a woman, and against the law to sell sex for money. Ain't it funny though? A generation before I was born, white men could sell our bodies, but now you gonna tell me a woman can't sell her own stuff? Huh. He could make money off of our bodies, but I can't make money off of my own? And I never snatched no woman up off the street like no overseer and delivered her to the slave owner like a piece of cake at a party. My woman came to me because they couldn't make no decent money in the so-called legal jobs colored women could get them days. Now, I'm not saying I ain't a saint, but I sure ain't no criminal. And surely I saved some sisters because I treated my women right. I thought for myself, and I thought the way they treated women then, especially colored women, now that was the crime. You could find work, but they were determined that you would not get rich, and really all I wanted was all the money any white man could make. And so, I did it. Now, let me back up here for a minute and tell you all how I got started. Mine is no rags to riches tale. I was never poor. I was born in 1907 in Washington, D.C., and I saw and did a lot in those 83 years. My mother was a seamstress, and my daddy owned a barber shop. Where else you think I learned to wield a straight edge? Well, my parents also owned some properties around town, and we had money. I was especially good in math, which really helped me in my businesses. And I graduated from the prestigious Dunbar Senior High School with honors back in 1925. But I was sick of all them uppity girls who looked down on me because I was big boned, dark, and ugly. I didn't want nothing to do with college or so-called middle-class Negro life. And it was all just a lot of image and pretense, but what I wanted was money, and I wanted what it could buy. But I also wanted to have fun. So at 17, I went into business for myself. Now, listen, I started off buying 2 tins of whiskey at $5 each and selling shots for 25 cents. The next week, I made enough to buy 4 tins, and it skyrocketed from there. Everybody wanted to do business with me and to go into business with me, but I was selective about who I partnered with. Well, I grew up around a lot of Irish kids, and we were good friends, and we were tight in D.C., and we often fought together against the German and Italian kids. And I learned to use my fists and a blade. A lot of my friends became police officers, and that's who I chose to go into business with. I paid them off, and they protected me and my businesses in exchange. And as a young woman, I ran speakeasies, places where you could just drink and relax during the Prohibition. Now, that was a good run from 1920 to 1933. Until alcohol was legalized again. But I had clubs during and after Prohibition. All the mobsters, they kept the clubs. And after Prohibition, we just rose up from the underground. And all the gay bars were run by mobsters. Well, hell, one of my most successful enterprises was Club Madre. And everybody was there. Gay, straight, black, white, Latino, men, women. And that's another way I was bringing folks together for a good time and a drink. Alcohol wasn't a crime anymore, but homosexuality was. Sex and love a crime? What's wrong with these people? Well, with liquor comes women and gambling, so I ran that too. And I usually had me about 20 pretty little light-skinned gals working for me. Men and women didn't know what to do or what to think when I walked down the street with these women on my arms, and I enjoyed showing them off. About the only other woman like me with nerve was my friend Jackie Mabley. You probably remember her as Mom's Mabley. Well, rumor had it that we were lovers. Rumors. I should just let y'all sit there and wonder about that. Me and Jackie? Now that's just nasty. We was too much like the same. We was like brothers. We both wanted them pretty little light-skinned gals. If you haven't heard of me before, then clearly you weren't in the in crowd with me and Ramsey Lewis, because I definitely was with the in crowd. And I knew Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Nat King Cole, and Joe Louis. And of course, I stayed tight with the top brass. Hell, I practically ran the D.C. Police Department. I can't tell you how many thousands of dollars I gave Pat O'Shea. He was one of my childhood friends who grew up to be superintendent of the police department. I ain't even missed that money. It was just a business expense. In the 1930s, Depression, I was living high on the hog. Depression? Depression? Hell, what that got to do with me? I average $100,000 annual income, and that's worth about $1.6 million a year today. And crime was paying me and paying me well. Yes, I did know Al Capone and all the other mob bosses. I was known as the mob counselor. They called on me to mediate between the black and white gangsters. I kept the peace like the cops couldn't hope to dream of. And I saved some lives with my counseling skills. Stopped a lot of mobsters from getting killed. But back to the beginning of my story. To me, it wasn't crime. It was a crime that so many people living the straight life was so poor they couldn't even afford a doctor. Some couldn't even afford to die. And I helped a lot of people with the money I made, and I paid for a lot of funerals. But, you know, finally caught up with me after I had a good, fun run. They found out about my payoffs to the cops, and we all went down. I went to prison in 1961, arrested a total of 30 times over the years, and I spent a total of 13 years locked up. At first, though, getting locked up was like an after party. That party wagon was a party bus, but the GI men wouldn't stop. And there was a gumshoe on every corner. And every time I came out, I had less and less protection. It got so bad that a decent woman couldn't even afford to pay a cop off anymore. And there was nobody left but me and my pistol. And you know, coming out for that last time, I knew I had to just retire from the streets. But it was fun while it lasted. And honestly, being in the Bing wasn't that bad, especially if you like the ladies.
My Odessa died in 1990 with no money. Her friends had to collect money to bury her, and they ain't raised nothing but $51. Some said she was paying for her sins. She was my angel, and she deserved better.
Slavery attempted to take so many things from us, things they couldn't take, understand, or eliminate. They tried to minimize or make fun of by forcing European alleged norms onto. I'm going to put that right there. Heterosexuality was one thing and rhythm was another. There were two things oppressors never managed to wrestle control of. Enslaved people found a way to keep music and rhythm as a secret way to praise. Most white people gave little thought to our depth. Largely, we were thought of as just a different kind of cattle, just a thing labeled slaves from Africa. Never comprehending the falsehood in the name, people were stolen from Africa and turned into slaves. Our humanity was never considered, but humans have always found ways to worship, love, and celebrate who they are, and as they wanted, even if it was coded in veiled secrecy. Music and rhythm became means to lament, curse, rejoice, practice, instruct, and mock, oftentimes right in the face of colonizer oppression. Ways people employed dance as a means of resistance to systemic racism included Brazilian capoeira, Puerto Rican bamba, for example. Even enslaved wedding couples jumping the brooms as a way of using dance as resistance, accepting white beliefs while under forced white rule. The cakewalk was a method of resistance and empowerment. The cakewalk was a brilliant example for us to simultaneously satirize our oppressors and celebrate in our culture. But we can't even begin to talk about it without you understanding that we black people let them believe they created the structure. They were, of course, wrong. And while we did hambo and patted Juba on our knees and thighs, we contemplated freedom and made plans and danced. Slavery made us simply find other creative ways to express what we needed to. What is not commonly known is that there were segments in society that were spaces for same-gender relationships to be safe. It wasn't an economically wise idea for slaveholder to entertain in the idea of two strong, big black bucks aligned. It was at best troubling, for some anyway. So some of us took to other ways of expression. Slave masters always did love a dancing Negro. It's a lesser-known tale in queer black history. It's fascinating. Might even call it a piece of cake. But when you understand what that really means, it takes on a whole new flavor, because nothing was easy for us and few things tasted good for people of color in the 19th century. Now, it's been said that a cakewalk is understood as something easily accomplished. Wrong. Cakewalks were entertainment shows white slave owners had enslaved people perform, and they graciously bestowed upon the winner, a piece of cake. But we were cunning enough to turn this harm-based activity into something all our own, mock white people, make them love it, and become famous. We mocked the white manners of moving, dressing, stiff, starched, pressed, but often unclean clothing and lack of manual dexterity. Eventually, the cakewalk turned into a celebration all our own with no shame. Of course, there occurred cultural misappropriation by all the whites, and I've personally said it more than once. They are welcome to their version. Thank you very much. They cakewalk. It morphed into drag balls, queening, Vogue shows, and even the negative spaces, the minstrel shows. The tradition of masquerade and civil balls, more commonly known as drag balls, began back in 1869 within Hamilton Lodge. All black spaces were being queer. It was being accepted. But outside of these, not so much. And it took the mastermind of a queen to help it make it so. Long before the Chicago drag houses, the Harlem scene, Stonewall, etc., The cakewalk existed as a form of freedom. Cakewalks became a way for gay men to gather and express ourselves. Slave masters thought they were being celebrated and copied. Who knows what those fools thought after slavery? And I, William Dorsey Swann, became the grand dame of the cakewalk. They called me the Queen. I was resplendent in either long silky dresses or elaborate top hats and tails. I was both loved and hated. I was born around 1858, the fifth of 13 children. I began life enslaved on a plantation in Hancock, Maryland. After the Emancipation Act in 1862, my family purchased a farm in Washington County. Migrating toward D.C. in the 1800s, carved out a community for myself. All black, gay men, many drag artists, but I was the architect. I was the first to give drag queens their name. Some believe I was the leader of possibly the world's earliest known LGBTQ liberation group. Secret balls run by former slaves began to pop up after emancipation in pocket spaces across the country because of me, my fierceness, and my fortitude. Wasn't arrogance, just fact. Attendees would gather to dance, including performing their best cakewalks, dressed in their most glamorous outfits. It was a time of hope and excitement for freed slaves, and many wished to express themselves against social norms. Despite no laws against cross-dressing existing at the time, these balls were deemed immoral and regularly raided by police, with occupants falsely charged with running brothels. They thought they left no stone unturned. I myself had been beaten, examined by doctors as deviant was a medical issue, and jailed. It did not stop me. Even when whites began to employ blackface and dance the cakewalk, even as they tried to pat Juba and to attempt to regain power, it did not stop the momentum. It did not stop the shows. It did not take my rhythm. I was even arrested with the names of a long list of men outed for congregating in dishonorable fashion. I faced off against a policeman as a young queen and told him, "You is no gentleman." I never regretted that outcome of that remark. Huge rage. Raids as at my well-known parties were not unheard of. At my 30th birthday party, they raided 30 men in drag. 17 men escaped the raid while 13 men were arrested. They subsequently appealed for a pardon to the sitting president, President Grover Cleveland. It was, of course, denied. On paper, William Dorsey Swann was born in Maryland in 1858 and recorded as owned at birth by a plantation woman named Anne Murray. Owned. Furthermore, my public arrest record still stands for all to see and witness the overt challenge to the homophobia of society. It is often argued that homophobia, rather than homosexuality, is a colonial import. But I, the queen of drag, took this form of embracing struggle. Persistence and fortitude made it my holding tight to the sweet and the bitter by triumphing over the horrible and making it grand. Dare I say, a piece of cake.